Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, hosting today's show on the 16th day of August, 2021. Up first, fire danger map. And there's no fire danger that reached the high category around the state today. Probably the area of highest fire danger in the state would be along the Copper River, in the Copper River Basin, Gulkana area. Been kind of drier there, and south winds kicking up 30-35 miles an hour this afternoon. So that kind of pushing it up almost to high, but not quite making it to get it on the chart here. So from there, moving on to hazardous weather. None. There are no public watches, warnings, or advisories out, at least at this point in time, around the state. And hopefully that'll last through tonight and into tomorrow as well. Looking good. No big storms poised to affect the Aleutians. We do have a system out over the Aleutians, pushing rain, fair amount of rain, and some gusty winds into the Alaska Peninsula today. Otherwise, not too bad. Some earlier showers ended over the Panhandle. Dry day there with a little bit of sunshine, especially down to the south. But other areas of the southeast coast had some sun breaks this afternoon. Also up into the eastern Copper River Basin, looks like around Northway, Tok, and those areas in Abesna, probably saw some sun. And otherwise, a lot of clouds and moisture. You can see solid clouds in over the central interior, but things drying out after a wet start to the day over the Seward Peninsula. That area, clouds moving out, and skies beginning to clear with the rain ending, then skies clearing there for the at least the central and southern Seward Peninsula this afternoon. Fair amount of rain, moderate to briefly heavy, into the central interior once again, with 24-hour rainfall amounts over an inch in some locations. Otherwise, up off the Arctic coast there, you can see the south side of a kind of a pinwheel spiral motion of the clouds. That's a low pressure area surfacing aloft, bringing chillier air down from the northwest into the western Arctic coast, keeping temperatures in the 30s there into the mid-afternoon hours. And snowfall levels kind of low, especially for the western Brooks Range. But sea level, any precipitation falling in the form of rain. And otherwise, not much going on out over the Bering Sea. That kind of dying area of clouds there around Adak and Atka, extending up toward the Pribilos. That's the washing out, occluded front with the main system and the bulk of the moisture pushing in toward Kodiak Island. Not much in the way of precipitation on the east side of the island yet, at least in the mid-afternoon, but heavier rain actually back to your west brought some pretty significant rainfall into the Seward Peninsula today. Sand Point had about just under 9/10 of an inch in 12 hours, while Accoon Island picked up 7/10 of an inch as that system went by. And gusty winds, highs 45 miles an hour at Cold Bay with the system. And otherwise, that was a peak wind gust. Kind of breezy with higher pressure trying to build along the ahead of the system today into the Gulf of Alaska. That kind of kicked the winds up, turning an arm. East winds, McHugh Creek had a peak gust earlier today, of 84 miles per hour. That's definitely the exception, while Bird Point was about 40 miles an hour. But Ted Stevens International Airport, peak wind 32 miles an hour, about 35 miles an hour at the other location there that for some reason the name escapes me. Anyway, about 30-35 mile an hour wind gusts. Was coming down now for the northern Cook Inlet area. Nikiski had gusts 35, almost 40 miles an hour at Nikiski there near Kenai. Otherwise, winds kicking up this afternoon with sunshine breaking out over the Copper River Basin. Temperatures in the mid to upper 60s there with those south winds, and that kind of pushing that fire danger up toward the high category there, but nothing too serious. A lot of rain over the interior. Manly Hot Springs, 24-hour rainfall amount of 1.08 inches. Little Chena Ridge, northeast of Fairbanks, had a 24-hour rainfall amount of 1.5 inches. And pretty moderate rains extended westward in a fairly wide swath. Nome picked up half an inch, but it's since ended earlier there and cleared out this afternoon. While Ruby, Koyuk, and Galena all picked up about 0.85 inches in the last 24 hours. So some pretty soaking rains through the central interior. And outlook for tonight, rain pushed across Kodiak Island and will increase along the North Gulf Coast. Chance of rain with that frontal boundary into Cook Inlets, the Sit-in-the Valley areas, and into the Copper River Basin, but heaviest will be along the southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula and the North Gulf Coast into Prince William Sound. And rain, periods of, continues over the eastern interior, slowly ending from west to east, and the whole system starting to lighten up on the precipitation amounts and intensity. And it stays wet over the Alaska Peninsula, but winds will be less than what they were today or earlier today. Same thing with the eastern Aleutians, low clouds, fog, IFR, periods of rain, and light variable winds for the overnight hours tonight with the low center pretty much right in the area there. And definitely IFR flying conditions, and over the Bering Sea areas of IFR as well. And chance of rain or snow, light rain or snow, central western Arctic coast, western North Slope. Some of that could slip on down to the north shore of the Seward Peninsula areas. And the forecast for tomorrow, that system, excuse me, 1007 millibar low pushes northeast to just south of Middleton Island. That's going to push a slug of moisture for rain. Pretty good solid rain tomorrow for the north coast and the eastern North Gulf Coast as it becomes more showery over south central Alaska and eventually Prince William Sound. Kind of mostly cloudy showers, Copper River Basin, eastern interior, kind of another band of rain with that trough up over the central Tanana Valley area, but clearing out behind, and looks pretty nice for the Seward Peninsula and most of the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. Chance of rain kind of stays unsettled that week low over the Alaska Peninsula. So for the Alaska Peninsula up toward Kodiak, kind of unsettled and mostly cloudy conditions, and still a chance of rain or snow showers, light, no accumulation expected, at least at the lower elevations for the western North Slope and Arctic coast. And the Bering Sea pretty much storm-free with just low clouds and fog and light winds, light variable winds for the Pribilofs. Could see some sunshine possibly there. And for the next day, that system coming out of the Russian Far East, we saw for tomorrow afternoon there, jumps to the east just south of St. Lawrence Islands. That increases the rain and pushes it inland, especially from Nunivak Island into the Yukon Delta. Not quite just an increase in clouds of the Kuskokwim Delta. Otherwise, central interior, sunshine, partly mostly sunny, right on down to the lower Yukon River Valley. Lingering showers, eastern North Slope, chance of rain or snow, light rain or snow, North Slope, Arctic coast there. Another weak trough in that area, may be the last of the series. And that front keeps periods of rain. Another system develops, pushes into the Panhandle, so more rain for the entire southeast coast, eastern North Gulf Coast. Maybe some clearing for Prince William Sound. Risk of a shower, but the east side of Kodiak Island looking mostly sunny. Looking at the low temperatures tonight, southern Alaska and the Panhandle, 50, upper 40s to lower 50s, otherwise mid to upper 40s, Bristol Bay and the Kuskokwim Valley. And for the highs tomorrow, 60, 65, Bristol Bay, in the 50s for the Kuskokwim Valley, and 55 to 62 south central Alaska, mid to upper 50s Copper River Basin, North Gulf Coast, and the Panhandle, warmest in the south. And for the lows following morning, lower 50s for the Panhandle, mid 40s to lower 50s south central Alaska. Look at the upper 30s now into the Nikolai McGrath area, and mid to upper 40s for Bristol Bay. Lower 50s Kodiak Island, followed by highs, a little more sunshine into the 60s, mid 60s there, Bristol Bay up to Iliamna, lower to mid 60s, south central Alaska, Kenai Peninsula area, near 60 over the Panhandle, Copper River Basin. Up north, upper 20s to mid 30s for the lows tonight, Brooks Range to the Arctic coast. And for Tuesday morning, mid 50s central interior, milder, or for the afternoon highs, I thought those were lows, mid 50s for the Tanana Valley, and upper 30s to lower 40s for the North Slope and Arctic coast. And Wednesday morning, mid-20s to lower to mid-30s, down definitely in the mid-20s there for the Brooks Range areas of the North Slope. And highs near 40 for the Arctic coast, still struggling to reach 50 in the Tanana Valley and central interior, mid-40s out west. And 40s for your lows out in the Bering Sea and the southwest interior. Highs tomorrow, 55 to 60 over the southwest interior, but 50s for the Bering Sea. Lows Wednesday morning, 40s, and followed by highs in the mid to upper 60s, I mentioned for Bristol Bay, but cooler out along the coastline there with the Seward Peninsula right around 50, but mid 50s for the highs, Pribilof Islands to near 60, possibly on Alaska Peninsula, 55 to 63 there, with mid 50s for the Shimei 2 area. Otherwise, southern Alaska, looking a little bit milder with maybe some mid to possibly upper 60s, central areas of the Kenai Peninsula, Susitna Valley. But definitely not too bad, but still a little on the chilly side there for the Seward Peninsula, with Nome looking at a high near 50, otherwise mid 40s for the St. Lawrence Island area.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And moving on to the first line weather graphic for Tuesday morning, IFR, central western Arctic coast down across the western north slope of the Brooks Range, and then some areas of IFR along the Brooks Range, and then isolated IFR there, mostly north of Fairbanks in the mountainous terrain there. And otherwise marginal VFR scattered around with some VFR and the increase over the western interior and over toward the east. IFR along the central western Alaska Range, down into Kamishek Bay, Kodiak Island, all the Alaska Peninsula, all the Aleutians, most of the Bering Sea, IFR, North Gulf Coast IFR, Northern Panhandle IFR, Southern Southeast Coast there, VFR. And for the afternoon on Tuesday afternoon, shaping up like this, central western interior south of the Brooks Range, VFR right into Bristol Bay, Nunivak Island, Cook Inlet, Kamishek Bay, Kachemak Bay, interior areas of the Kenai Peninsula, marginal VFR up across Turnagain Arm, Knik Arm, Matanuska Valley, maybe marginal in the afternoon, Copper River Basin more likely, and along the Alaska Range, IFR, eastern North Gulf Coast into the northern Panhandle, becoming marginal, central Panhandle, southern areas, looking good, VFR. Some IFR lingering, Pribilof Islands down to the Unalaska Udmak Island area, Alaska Peninsula, and the central western Aleutians, IFR. And for the morning on Wednesday, IFR again, central western Arctic coast and the western north slope, south of the Brooks Range, VFR, the entire stretch of the Yukon River and Kuskokwim River as well. Some patchy marginal VFR along the western Alaska Range, a little bit more extensive there for the Talkeetnas, eastern Alaska Range, Wrangels, IFR down to the eastern North Gulf Coast, all of the Panhandle IFR, and IFR, Central Bering Sea, and all of the Aleutians and the north side of the Alaska Peninsula. For the afternoon, VFR, Brooks Range, marginal for the north slope, a little bit of IFR on the west central Arctic coast, and VFR in the interior right on down, Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast, Kodiak Island, some marginal VFR, Sitkinak, otherwise Kodiak-Fucknack Island looking good, northeast Bristol Bay VFR, marginal VFR along the west coast, and IFR, Nunivak Island, just catching eastern St. Lawrence Island, Pribilof's IFR to the western Aleutians from about Adak westward to Shemya, IFR, mostly IFR for the Panhandle. And for passes, Anatuvik, IFR becoming marginal, kind of an upward trend, lowest conditions in the AM, better in the afternoon for both Anatuvik and Adigan. And for Lake Clark, Merrill, occasional marginal VFR, especially early on. Possible IFR on the western approach early in the day for both passes there. Threw it in for rainy, IFR possible on the western entrance. That's where you'll probably find the lowest conditions, better off through the pass into the east. And for windy, IFR becoming marginal. Isabel, IFR becomes marginal as well, kind of an improving trend. Mentasta, marginal VFR, southern approach, areas to the south, VFR on the north side, out the north entrance. And for Tanita, marginal VFR at times throughout much of the day, but could trend toward VFR during the afternoon hours. And for Portage, IFR to marginal VFR. Chilkoot and White, solid IFR. And for the freezing levels, 2,000 feet coming southward again, right down to the south coast of the Seward Peninsula, angling back up toward Barter Island there, Kaktovik, and 4,000 to 8,000 feet across the west and southwest interior, across southern Alaska, pretty kind of tightening up along the North Gulf Coast. Otherwise, 10,000 feet over the Panhandle, the eastern Aleutian areas, and, well, actually all of the central southern Bering Sea to the Aleutians. And for icing, considerable moderate rime icing sliding up into the northern central Panhandle tomorrow with that system moving in. And otherwise, back to the west, isolated, moderate in that band there from the southwest mountains up across the western Alaska Peninsula through the Tanana Valley, and then up the east side, mixed or rime icing there, and even just a slight chance there along the Alaska Peninsula. And for the jet stream, Upper level low over the Arctic there, just off the eastern Arctic coast. So westerlies 60 to 70 knots for the most part, Bering Sea, coming across the Bering Sea from the Russian Far East and across central interior. Stronger jet, 100 knots up to the Panhandle, just clipping southern Kodiak Island. 9,000 feet, westerlies 30 knots, Kodiak Island, up to 65 knots, northern Panhandle, 35 knots right over the Tanana Valley, right over the Fairbanks area. 20 to 25 in the Arctic coast, and 3,025 to 30 knots for the Arctic coast, otherwise 55 knots right off the southeast coast. Look for considerable moderate turbulence below 5,000 feet for the central northern Panhandle.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, joined again by Eric Stevens from the GINA, or Geographic Information Network of Alaska at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Thanks for joining us again, Eric.
Glad to be here.
Thanks. We are talking about satellites today, and what are satellites? And the easy way to talk about that would be to introduce our friend the globe here, which is a round spheroid type shape. We haven't been on a flat Earth as far as history is known for several hundred years now, and because of that we also know that we are orbiting around other objects in space, and that objects are orbiting around the Earth as well. We call all those things satellites in some form or fashion, right, Eric?
Right. Well, this leads to the discussion of Johannes Kepler's research 400 years ago. Did some of the early work and founded the 3 laws of planetary motion, which are important to planets and also to weather satellites.
Okay.
Kepler's first law talks about how the orbit of an object around another object is an ellipse, not necessarily a circle.
Kind of a flattened circle?
Yeah, depending on how flat so it could be.
Okay.
For our purposes, we'll just say they're mostly circular.
Okay.
The second law is most important for us, though, and that is the closer an object is to the thing it's orbiting, the faster it goes. So in the solar system, the planet Mercury is the closest planet to the sun. It orbits the sun in 88 days. It moves at 100,000 kilometers an hour.
It's a lot different than Earth.
Moving.
Okay.
Right. And further out from the Earth is Jupiter, and it moves at only 1/4 the speed of Mercury, and it has to go further, so it takes 12 of our years for Jupiter to make one lap. The further out you are, the slower you go.
Okay.
So we're talking about planets. Why? What does it have to do with weather satellites? Turns out Kepler's laws apply to planets orbiting the sun. They also apply to satellites orbiting the Earth.
Okay.
You know, our natural satellite is the moon. There's the famous Apollo 8 Earthrise shot.
Beautiful shot.
Oh, yeah. You could just talk about that forever. December 1968, the moon is about 250,000 miles away from the Earth.
Okay.
Takes a month to go around the Earth. It's that far out, it takes a full month to do an orbit. Another shot here of the International Space Station. Instead of being 250,000 miles out, the ISS is only 250 miles up. It's really close. And so it doesn't take a full month for the space station to go around the Earth. It only takes 90 minutes. It's so close, it just whips right around 90 minutes.
Okay.
So weather satellites, there are a number of weather satellites, and there are a number of orbits. The further out you have the satellite, the longer it takes to go around the Earth. And this is important because different satellites have different purposes. So we have a satellite here. This little salt shaker lid will serve as our satellite going around the Earth. Let's say you have a satellite that's 22,000 miles above the Earth. This is kind of a magical spot because at that distance, it takes a full day for the satellite to go around the Earth. Imagine if you put your satellite 22,000 miles up from the equator and had it go with the Earth as the Earth spun.
The same speed.
Right. The satellite goes around the Earth just as fast as the Earth itself is turning. In effect, the satellite will hover in one spot,
I see.
and it appears when you make a movie loop of picture after picture after picture. You can replay that, and you get these movie loops. Geostationary satellites, these are called, because they're stationary in appearance, and they provide a constant frame of reference. We've got an example here. Another nice thing about these satellites, since they're that far out at 22,000 miles, you can see from pole to pole, which is nice. So they're pretty broad view and a constant frame of reference.
So those are the pictures. If you're watching a weather satellite loop on TV, your favorite weather show, that's the picture that you're going to see is one that's sitting over the same spot.
If you're seeing a movie loop play again and again, that came from geostationary satellites. That's the only way you can do that.
Yeah.
The bummer, though, for us in Alaska is we're up on the very top of the planet. And for geostationary satellites to work, they have to be over the equator. So for the geostationary bird to view Alaska, it's kind of like reading a book, but you're reading it edge on like that.
Right.
So there's another kind of orbit called the polar orbit, which is nice. We're near the pole.
Yeah.
And here's a satellite. Those polar orbiters are much closer to the Earth. getting down toward International Space Station elevation, and they're not in the equatorial plane. Rather, their orbital plane is inclined like this, and the Earth turns under that satellite as the satellite orbits. The nice thing about that is for Alaska, the satellite will go right over Alaska a few times a day. And so you get a much closer image. We've got a shot from the Sumi NPP satellite. Specifically, it's a true color image from the VIRS sensor. That's an acronym there. But it's a beautiful shot of Alaska, and you can see so much detail. The kind of detail, because you're close in.
Very high resolution.
You couldn't get this kind of view from geostationary satellites. The advantage of these polar orbiters is nice close imagery. You can see a lot of detail. The disadvantage, though, is that the satellite flies by, and then you have to wait a while to get the next image. And if geostationary weaknesses are that you're reading the page like that, the polar orbiter, you're reading the page straight on, but it's so close, and then it zips by, and you have to wait for the satellite to come around the Earth again. So there's no one perfect solution. Different satellites for different orbits. Each has their strength, and amazingly, it all comes back to Johannes Kepler and his laws of planetary motion. The same laws that govern how the planets orbit the sun, they govern how the satellites orbit the Earth, and even our little pretend salt shaker right here.
Right, okay. Well, since the 1957 Sputnik, we've been putting man-made objects into orbit around the Earth and starting to get pictures back. Who knows what will happen in the next 50 to 100 years. Amazing
it's
stuff.
It's a growing science, and the future is bright.
Thank you so much for joining us again, Eric. And for more information on GINA and what the satellite systems do there and what Eric's been talking about today, you can go to the web address on your screen. For Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis. Still that area of heavier ice just north of, say, a lake talk there off the eastern Arctic coast. And then some areas of thinner ice there, very close there west of Point Barrow on down to north of, say, Wainwright area there. And really not a lot of change expected here over the next several days. Moving on to the coastal water forecasts along the Panhandle. For Tuesday, we're looking at winds to be from the southwest, pretty brisk there, 30-35 knots. So on the south coast, we'll call it small craft advisory, southwesterlies 30 knots. Gale warnings on the central coast, southwest sustained 35 knots, 16-foot seas. Small craft advisories north coast, southeast 30 knots, 14-foot seas. Small craft advisories Lynn Canal, southerlies sustained at 30 knots and 20-knot winds with higher gusts for Stevens Passage from the south. Otherwise northwest 15 for Clarence Strait, seas 3 feet. And for Wednesday, winds westerly, central and south coast, 20 knots, 10-foot seas. 10 to 15 knot west winds on the north coast with 7 to 8-foot seas. And Lynn Canal winds coming down to 20 knots still from the south, south 15 for Clarence, or for Stevens Passage, Clarence Strait, northwest 15. Prince William Sound, east winds 20 knots, seas 3 feet for the day Tuesday. Gale warnings for the eastern North Gulf Coast, east winds 35 knots blowing right across Middleton Island, seas just under 10 feet. Northeast 25, western North Gulf Coast turn north at 25 for small craft advisories for the Barren Islands, seas 8 feet. Cook Inlet, north to northeast winds 10 to 15 knots, big reversal from today, and seas 2 to 3 feet. And northeast 15 for Kamishak Bay with 4-foot seas. On to Wednesday, Cook Inlet, south to southwest 10 knots, light, pretty light with seas 3 feet or less. South 15, Kamishak Bay, 4-foot seas, and southwest 15 to 20 knot winds for the Barren Islands, North Gulf Coast areas with seas running 6 to 7 feet. Prince William Sound, southwest to 10, seas 2 feet. Kodiak Island, along the east side, west winds 20 knots, seas 9 feet, and southwesterlies become northeasterlies in the afternoon for Shelikof Strait with 3-foot seas there. And for the area from Sitkinak all the way to Cape Sarachev, south side of the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula, southwest winds 20 knots, seas around 10 feet, and the Pacific side, or the the Bering Sea side, the north side of the Seward Peninsula, northeast at 15, Bristol Bay, northeast winds 15 knots, seas at 2 feet. And for Wednesday, Bristol Bay, southwesterlies at 15 knots, seas stay pretty low there at 2 feet. And for the Alaska Peninsula, southwest 15 to 20 knots, seas 4 to 7 feet. Southwest 15 for Kodiak Island, seas running 4 to 7 feet. Fox Islands, Unalaska Island, north to northwest 15 to 20 knots. Numak Island, northerlies 15 to 20, seas 5 to 11 feet. And AKwx, north 15 to 20 knots, northwest 15 Amchitka Island, Kiska to Shemya, west winds at 20 knots. Wednesday, Shemya to Kiska, southwest 20, seas 5 feet. Amchitka Island, west 15 knots, about the same for AKwx, west southwest 15 knots. Same thing for Numak Island, Unalaska Island, southwest to northwest 15 to 20 knots, 5 to 6 foot seas. South of Nunivak Island, we're looking at northwest winds of 15 knots with 3 foot seas. Light variable wind conditions for the Pribilof Island, seas down to 4 feet. And southeast 20 there for St. Matthew Island. St. Lawrence Island, Yukon Delta coast, northeasterlies, only at 15 knots, seas at about 4 feet. And for the day on Wednesday, small craft advisory, St. Lawrence Islands, east winds, 30 knots, seas 6 feet, easterlies at 20 for Norton Sound, 4 foot seas. Small craft advisories for the southwest coast, winds southwest 25 knots, 6 to 7 foot seas, southwest at 20 for the Pribilofs, with seas running at about 5 feet. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, west winds tomorrow, 15 to 20 knots, 3 to 4 foot seas, about the same for the central coast, west 20, northwest 15 for the western Arctic coast, all the way down to Wales. And seas running about 4 to 5 feet. Outlook for Wednesday, from Wales to Cape Thompson, east winds at 10 knots, 2 foot seas. Cape Thompson up the west side of the Arctic coast there, westerlies at 15 knots. Central and eastern Beaufort Sea coast, winds west 20 knots, seas 4 feet. For tonight, rain chances increase and move eastward across south central Alaska. That system pulling up, bringing moisture into the North Gulf Coast. Rain slowly shifting eastward, drying out from west to east over the interior. More rain moving into the Alaska Peninsula. And that shifts eastward with the system into the Panhandle tomorrow, heaviest in the north.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.